Ladies and gentlemen, good morning. Would you please welcome Vice President of Search Products and User Experience, Marissa Meyer.
Good morning and welcome to Google's factory tour of search. I'm really excited to have all of you here today because we wanted to give you an inside glance at what we're doing in search. Search today is broader than it's ever been before, it's more relevant than it's ever been before, and it's more innovative. So I've asked members of my team today to share with you what some of the most interesting things they're working on are. First up, we have RJ Pittman. RJ is our Director of Search Properties. RJ is a serial entrepreneur who came to us last fall. You may know him from his work at Groxus, where he developed the search technology Grokr. And as an expert in search interface design, he heads 12 of our search properties, including news, image search, trends, finance, and more. So we're going to hear what is really exciting on those properties from RJ this morning. Welcome, RJ.
Thanks, Marissa. Good to see you. Good morning. Well, there's a lot of things that we're excited to talk to you about today, so let's get to it. As Marissa mentioned, I am the manager of our search properties, and there are a lot of them. And the reason for that is pretty simple. Users today are using and working with content in a wide variety of ways. Sure, a lot of people are doing web searches. That's kind of a given with Google. But beyond web search, people are analyzing stock charts, reading news articles, browsing through pictures on the web. You get the idea. And it's my job at Google to try and make sure that all of our users are directed to the best user experience possible. So it's not enough to just provide a great content experience, but it's also important that we manage the influx, the overload of information that our users are being hit with today. It's no surprise that the world is getting more and more digital. I used to say that these generation of kids coming up today are born digital. Well, today, content is born digital. And with that fact, we're seeing just tremendous scale and tremendous growth of content online. So managing that is a really big challenge. Another part of my responsibility is managing the user experience and providing a seamless experience from one property to the next, whether it's researching a company on the stock market or getting information on the fate of our polar bears. These are very different experiences, and this is why search properties are so important. Today, I'd like to talk about 3 of our search properties and share with you some of the interesting innovations we're working on to help our users navigate this growing information, this sea of landscape of content that's all around us. Image search is one of our fastest growing properties. And if we zoom the camera lens out a little bit and look at the industry as a whole, I think you can see why. You might be interested to find that the market is bigger than it's ever been before for imagery and photos. Over 300 million photos, digital photos, are taken every single day. That's over 100 billion new digital images added to cyberspace every year. And if you multiply that by the number of camera phones and digital cameras that are being picked up every year, you can see how this exponential growth gets us not to billions, but to potentially trillions of images online. Now, that's the kind of number that I like. I'd like to see us one day be the search index that has over 1 trillion images to search from. Now, supposing that happens, how are we going to make this work? How are we going to sort this out for our users? Well, with the supply of all of these images that are coming online, it's no surprise that the demand is there too. More and more users are turning to image search than ever before. You can see that just in the past 2 years, the popularity has grown a couple orders of magnitude. This is pretty significant for such a short period of time. Literally hundreds of millions of searches every single day are being done on Google Image Search. So, as our users come to image search, it's important for us to help them navigate and do interesting things with image search. So innovation is hugely, hugely important today. So let's suppose that a user finds an image that they really like on image search. Well, it should be within Google's grasp to actually help them find more like it. The likeness of an image is actually a really difficult thing to figure out. Sure, you can find pictures that are of cars, or you can find pictures that all have a nice shade of blue in them, but to actually find a picture such as this scene of palm trees and a beach at sunset is much more difficult. But using our image similarity technology that we have today with some of the best computer researchers in computer vision and image processing, it's one click away. In addition to that, let's suppose now that a user wants to find any picture that has the Eiffel Tower in it. Now, this is a different challenge because identifying an object in a picture is different than also identifying the similarity of a picture. At Google, we have some of the first and the best technology in object recognition. And we too believe that with this technology and the millions and billions and trillions potentially images that are coming online, adding this kind of technology to help our users find more of what they're looking for is going to be hugely important. Now, another example, people love to search for people. That's a fact. Everybody does it, and people love to look for celebrities, look for their friends, etc. online. So this is where our technology really comes into play and is particularly important. For example, face detection is important to, in this example, be able to disambiguate between a searcher that's looking for the DeLorean in the car or the man behind the car, John DeLorean himself. Now, we'd also like to be able to take that one step further for our users. Supposing that you were looking for John DeLorean and you'd like to see any picture that John DeLorean is in. Well, using our facial recognition technology, that is a reality, and that's something we're working to make, again, just one click away. As a matter of fact, some of this technology you may not even realize is available in image search today. If you go into our advanced search panel, you'll find this capability available. And we're working on a lot of exciting ways to make it even more powerful. Now, in addition to the interesting things you can do with sorting and navigating these images, we also care about the content itself. As you can imagine, at Google, we like things big. And imagery is one area that we think there's a lot of opportunity for growth. We're all used to our digital cameras snapping 2 megapixel, 5 megapixel, and now 10 megapixel photos. But suppose you had images that were 1,000 megapixels or a gigapixel. This is where the new frontier is. And at Google, we're working on a number of interesting projects, one that you may have heard of called the GigaPan project, where we're very involved in making images available at up to 3 gigapixels. Using advanced image feeds, we're able to get the best of these high-quality images, whether it's a gigapixel or a megapixel, from the best content publishers and provide a rich image search experience. This is fairly new for us, and it's a way to really enrich the user experience around images. In addition to that, you'll probably notice that your camera phone, particularly if it's GPS enabled, is able to encode your photo not just with all of the information about the exposure, the aperture, the f-stop of that picture, the megapixels, what the resolution is, but it can also encode it with the geolocation of precisely where that camera phone was when you snapped the picture. Now, this gets very interesting when you want to start searching pictures from a totally different dimension. And when Carter comes up and talks to us about geotagging and geospatial imagery and searching geospatial images, you get a sense of exactly where we're headed with this. And finally, talking about all of these innovations is great, but what we really want to do is surface these for our users. And we'll be talking later about when and where you're going to see some of these new technologies come to light. Now, many users at Google do things beyond search. It can be as quirky as using Google for spell check. It can be as quirky as using Google to use it as a calculator. And why are people doing that? Well, because Google is so fast and it's so easy, and you can just type in your computation, you can type in the word that you're not sure of how it's spelled, and it gives it right back to you. Well, similarly, we're seeing the same behavior emerge on image search. Whether it's shopping and looking for inspiration for preparing a meal or a fine dessert, planning the next great vacation, managing your family's health, and perhaps most importantly and most fun is shopping for a birthday present. As the use cases for image search broaden, so too does the relevance of commerce-related activities. This is exactly what we saw in web search several years ago. There's a direct connection between these uses and commerce. Now, we've experimented with this before on image search, and we have looked at ways to create a better user experience, not only for our users, but also for our advertisers. And they haven't always been successful. And this is important to note because advertising at Google is driven by user experience, and the user always comes first. So we're not ashamed to go back to the drawing board and continue to work on this until we reach a point where we are satisfied and our users indicate to us that an advertising experience has come together. Now, what we're announcing today is a new suite of image-related experiments. And here we're pairing images with images for the very first time, or display ads with image search. And we believe that if we can align the nature of the images from the advertisers with the nature of the images in image search, we can really help our users find more of what they're looking for. And frankly, we may also help them achieve some of these new use cases that they're conducting on image search, such as shopping and recipe hunting. So you'll see that these renderings here show a fairly seamless and more pleasing user experience than just running a stack of ads down the side or across the top. We're really looking for a true user experience alignment. And we've kind of overstated this for the purposes of the camera and the projector so that you could see clearly. They won't be quite this prominent. It will be a little bit more seamlessly integrated in the actual product. But we're really excited to get these out there. And most importantly, we're excited to hear what our users think about this. And you can be sure that we'll keep you posted on how this goes. Now, I'd like to shift gears and talk about news. And as it happens, news publishers happen to be one of our greatest sources for images. But they're an even better source for Google News. At the core of Google News, as you all probably know, is the story cluster. This clustering technology is pivotal to the user experience and our unique approach to news. And a story cluster is essentially a collection of articles about a specific storyline over a specified period of time. This really is at the heart of how we think about news. Now, if you pair that with our powerful search technology, we have some pretty amazing capabilities. We can sort, organize, cluster, classify news into section pages, and localize that information for you. I mentioned localize because we recently launched local search, and this was a pretty big effort. And why was this an effort? Well, local information and local news is a really hard problem to solve because it's not just about zip codes and city names. There is a great deal of complexity in a story, and really taking it down into its pieces, word by word, and really understanding what that story is about and where that story is taking place is a bit elusive. So it goes beyond the zip code. It goes beyond the city name. We have to disambiguate everything from Paris, France, to Paris Hilton, Paris, Michigan, and Paris, Texas. And the way that we are approaching this is actually quite novel. We're leveraging the power of our story clusters. So to be sure that a story is about a particular location or is happening in an area near your hometown, we're able to look across hundreds and even thousands of stories that are tied to that story cluster to reaffirm the approximations that indeed this news story is about this town. If we didn't have the story cluster, we would not have the ability to be that accurate. This is exciting stuff. I'd like to see how we're reusing and leveraging some of our earliest innovations and taking them forward for our users. Now you can see here in this particular example, with local news, it's not just about Mountain View, California. We also think about proximity in a very fluid sense. Local to me may mean Mountain View, local to me may mean the Bay Area. Being able to identify this not only with the content that's in the news story, but also by recognizing the location of the sources of that information and incorporating that signal into the local news experience is critical to really getting the best experience for our users. Another really cool feature that we've launched recently is quote search. And I think this is a pretty good example. Suppose you're in line and ready to vote for the next American Idol. It's coming up this week. The finals are on Wednesday. And if you wanted to get a preview and recap and do some research before weighing in your vote, certainly one thing I would do is go back and look at everything that Simon Cowell said about the finalists. And now you can do that today on Google News. By doing a quote search for Simon Cowell, I get all of the searches. And then from there, I can actually search into both Davids and find out what he thinks about each of them and get a sense for where this thing may turn out. Now, the other cool thing with this is we are also using the very same clustering technology to really perfect these quotes. It's very difficult to actually make sure that the Simon Cowell we're talking about is in fact the one that's on American Idol and is the one that's quoting specifically the performance of these particular contestants. So using the clustering technology, again, across thousands of articles where these quotes appear, we can reaffirm the accuracy of our engine. So I'd like to also talk about another kind of quote. This time it's the stock quote. And Google Finance launched about a year and a half ago, and Google Finance was Google Finance. And we started with a very humble and very focused mission to build a very powerful and simple stock market tool, a window into the market. And we led that introduction with a very powerful visualization tool. Our charting tools were recognized as some of the most intuitive and easy to understand in the industry. And this was important because the goal of Google Finance is to help all users navigate the complexities of the financial markets. And we recently launched a new version of our homepage bearing this in mind because our users were asking us for more context. They wanted more than just stock quotes. They wanted the rich market-driving content that is affecting the stock markets and affecting their specific portfolios. So leveraging the power of news and those news clusters, we were able to integrate this right into the Google Finance user experience and give users a fantastic news capability that is not available anywhere on the web. In addition to that, we realized that, hey, we've been innovating and we were known for some of this great visualization technology. We've got to keep moving it forward. And a very mysterious and elusive and, frankly, complex feature in most online finance sites is a stock screener, being able to pick stocks based on your criteria that meet your investment needs and your risk preferences. Well, those tend to be pretty cumbersome airplane dashboards, and we basically took that apart and put it together again in a very simple and intuitive interface. And you can see here with this particular layout, the user can get a bird's eye view of virtually every stock that's traded in the public markets, and all of those stocks can be filtered by any criteria based on the size of the company, their financial performance, their PE ratios, you name it. And this has become hugely popular. We're really happy with the success of this product. I think we're setting the standard again for demystifying some of these complexities that we see in the markets. Another key element of Google Finance, you may have realized when we launched this product, only launched it in the United States. And part of the reason there was to really focus on getting it right. And as soon as we were sure of that, we launched the new homepage, but we also launched something else, the Google Global Finance Platform. This is an important innovation for us because we realize that in our mission to organize all of the world's information, this has to hold true for finance as well. And as we launched the new product, I'm excited to say that we were able to simultaneously launch in 4 countries. Not just the US, but China, the UK, and Canada, with many more on deck. So in many ways, we're just getting started with Google Finance, and the world is just getting a taste of what's to come. Now, no factory tour would be complete without a stroll through the Google factory floor. And for that, I would like to invite up our product manager from Google Labs, Michael Cohen, to share with us some of the exciting things happening there.
Thanks, RJ.
Hey,
How's it going?
Good to have you. So, Michael, tell us a little bit about Labs. I've been looking at Labs for a long time and sort of staring at it in hopes that we're going to see some great new innovations coming out of Google. In the old days, there used to be like sort of a new thing every month coming out of Labs. And lately, seems like there's a big pile of stuff. It's like a parking lot. What's happening?
Sure. I really wanted to come up to you and talk about lab strategy. I didn't realize we'd have all these people observing, but this is as good a time as any, I guess.
Absolutely. I'm going to put you on the spot. We can have a product strategy discussion here. I'm sure they won't mind. Love to hear what you have in store.
Sure. Let's go. So Labs is our chance to showcase some of our most innovative and creative experiments. And we realize that they're not all going to be home runs. We've had some pretty high-profile graduates. If you think about things like Maps and iGoogle, we realize we also have our share of fifth-year seniors on the list as well. But that's exactly our point with Labs. We're trying to be innovative and experiment a lot. I want to talk about 2 particular examples, experimental search and Google Trends, which are pointing out the directions we're going to be going with Labs. Experimental search, which we launched last year, is the first in a line of lab sections dedicated to our existing products. What this lets you do is actually bolt on experiments to your existing Google search, so that when you conduct searches on Google, these experiments will follow you along, and you won't have to visit specific labs pages. For example, if you were to join this alternate search view experiment, every time you did a search on Google, you would have the option of seeing a timeline or a map view for your search results. We've got a lot more experiments of this form coming through the pipeline. While our existing products are doing some great innovation, the heart and soul of Labs is really around our new product development. And Google Trends is a great example, and it's really still developing. Our vision behind Trends is to allow users to understand consumer and market trends by seeing what people are searching for on Google. You can see from this chart that the top chart shows our search volume for different queries on Google, while the bottom chart shows how these different queries showed up in the news. This particular example is probably the ultimate seasonal effect, looking at shorts and sweaters. In this example, we're actually looking at superheroes, Spider-Man, Batman, and Superman, and seeing how the query volume for them develops. You can actually see that the spikes might very well correlate to the different movies around these different superheroes. You may even wonder if the relative height of the spikes suggests how successful the different movies have been.
Michael, let me stop you right there for a minute.
Sure.
That's kind of interesting. So it seems to me that with these types of trends, they can be correlated to interesting economic indicators. Like, might we see something like this in Google Finance? I could almost imagine sort of a trends overlay with a stock chart that might help the user see some of these correlations as they map back.
RJ, that's a really cool idea. I don't really want to spill the beans on anything, but we're always thinking about interesting ways of applying this technology to our existing products.
Good.
In this particular example, which is very timely, you can see our different presidential candidates and how search queries for them are varied over time. One particular thing you might note is as candidates left the race, you can see how queries for them sort of fell off the map. Also, if you, say, had a theory that search queries were predictive of success in elections, you might also be interested in mining this data to see how it varied across geographies. So in summary, Labs is really at the core of innovation at Google. We have a lot of great stuff in the pipeline coming through for Labs. While I can't guarantee that every single one of them are going to be home runs, I can certainly guarantee that there's going to be some really exciting stuff. So you better come back and check it out.
Thanks, Michael.
Sure, RJ.
Appreciate it. Well, just to restate what Michael said, innovation is absolutely at the core of Google, and the engineering power at the company has never been stronger. And I'm excited to see what Michael has in store for us. And I think Labs is going to be an exciting place to watch over the next year as we continue to renovate the factory and bring out some of these innovations in great form. So that's it for my segment of the tour. I'd like to invite Marissa back up onto the stage, but before I do, I'd also invite you guys to stop by our little station and round table at the lunch break, where we're actually going to be able to give you a sneak peek into some of these new innovations that we're working on here at Google. Thank you.
Thanks, RJ. One of our big home runs from Labs was Google Maps and has continued to be Google Maps. And Carter Maslin, who you'll hear from next, is the director of local search quality. So he owns a big part of Google Maps. How do we find things, literally find things in physical space better? His span of responsibility includes local search quality, our Maps wiki projects, and more. So with that, welcome Carter Maslin. Thanks.
So good morning. My name's Carter Maslin, and I'm just thrilled to be here to lead a tour of local search. And joining me on stage is Dana Nguyen. She's going to be our maestro on the demo keyboard. And as much as I'm happy to be here, if it were a real factory tour, actually seeing the engineers that are doing the heavy lifting and pushing the bits, we'd have to take a round-the-world trip. So instead of that, you'll see them in inset pictures as we talk about each of the challenges that we're addressing in local search. So RJ mentioned the fact that he's optimizing search for different content types, like images, news, and finance. And for local search, we do something similar for things like addresses and business listings. But local search has an added challenge, because local search is really a geographic lens onto any content type that has some correlation to place. And in the process of looking through that geographic lens, we are fulfilling kind of our ambition to be an organized collection of all the world's information, just organized geographically. So truly building a map that contains the world's information. So what we're going to do on the tour is cover 3 things. One, we're going to find out why it's hard. 2, we'll take a look at the state of the art in addressing some of the complications. And then 3, we're going to go through some innovative work that's springing up on top of the work to date. And by the end, I hope you have kind of some new insights in local search, but also kind of share my secret delight that every time I imagine this room full of hardworking engineers working away to fulfill my casual query of pizza SF. So let's get started by just asking why it's hard. If your ambition is to provide the best information about any place on the planet, the first challenge is how do you even identify and describe a place? So just to go to the basics, let's start with a basic example that's from my hometown. These are 2 of a handful of engineers that work on one of the most computationally complex problems in local search, and that's clustering and clustering it with related web pages. So Julian Bosch and Natan, they work on those 2 problems as applied to this scene. Here's a typical scene where we've got a playground in the upper left, we've got a soccer field, we've got a golf center. And if you're trying to have all the information that best describes these places, you may start by saying, well, let's start by trying to identify it by street address. But unfortunately, they all share the same street address in the entrance. Then you say, well, how about maybe phone number will provide a clue? But both the golf center and the restaurant within the golf center both share the same phone number. You go on and try hint after hint, whether it's geocode or other category hints, title hits, and it becomes this problem where you've got lots of good hints, but none of which are precise enough to actually uniquely identify the place you're talking about. The second problem is whose reality is it? And reality, believe it or not, is a question in a lot of cases. If you take a map of this region of the world and you say, let me just find a place on the planet, you'd think that that's a pretty objective question. But in fact, when you start adding in disputed political boundaries and borders, and you add in a variety of alternate names and alternate languages that all vary by the country of the user that's issuing the query, it becomes more and more complex. So we have Alan and Andrew that are working on searching the planet for things and taking into account where the person is when they issue the search, what country, what language, and how to deal with all of these different complexities in interpreting reality. Kind of as a third problem, a lot of times people's questions have different answers. Like if someone were to say from a local search perspective, find New York, New York, you'd think that that is kind of completely unambiguous, that they're talking about New York, New York, and we do in fact return New York, New York, but if they're over Las Vegas, they may be looking for the hotel called New York, New York. And so we have Vlad in the upper right there who's working on interpreting queries based on the viewport from which they issue that local query. Kind of the fourth challenge is that local search has an extremely long tail. If you take a query for something like rope swing, there's one kind of long tail that represents, but then if you slice it by all the places in the world where there might be a rope swing, it's a very long, thin tail. So one of the biggest challenges is addressing a personal challenge I have. Driving 3 hours to a rural part of Maine that's absolutely beautiful, wanting to find a rope swing, how many people can actually tell me the precise location? The green marker represents one of the best rope swings on one of the best lily ponds in Deer Isle, Maine. There's not a lot of people. So we've got 2 people here, Steve Stern and Ramesh, who are working on 2 aspects of this long-tail development of local search content. Steve works on the instant indexing so that you've got hundreds of millions of places being viewed by millions of people and having the updates go live immediately. That's a hard technical challenge that he's addressing. And Ramesh is working on the whole user experience of editing and modifying places on the map. And one thing that might be fun is to go to a demo of maps.google.com recent edits. Just as a sampling, maybe, Dana, you could go to recent edits. Can you go to the demo screen, please? Thank you. So every 8 seconds or so, this is just cycling through a random sample of the modifications that end users are making to make the maps more accurate. It's a fun app to watch the world improving in its accuracy as we speak. Maybe we could go back to slides, please. So as you work through these problems in identifying a place, clustering, the long tail of specialized queries, the interpretations that vary by geography, you quickly realize that perfect local search requires a near perfect mirror world, where you've got everything replicated in a virtual place that is searchable. That brings us to kind of one of the main state-of-the-art challenges, which is creating this canvas for people to annotate on the planet. How do we create that base substrate that a lot of content can grow up on and be situated in? So it starts with satellite collection. So this is the Digital Globe satellite that creates high-res imagery. This is the Spot 5 from France that creates medium resolution that covers much of the planet. And this is the high-res aerial imagery over a typical spot that you might need the detail to know exactly where the equipment goes in a baseball field or where the rendezvous point is for a swim meet. But in addition to those, I thought we'd bring the imagery collection in the context of search. How does a global blanket of good imagery relate to search? So what I thought we'd do is assume we're in San Francisco, if we could go to the demo. And let's say that we're at the Moscone Convention Center and we'd like to go to the Giants game. We can simply say from Moscone to Giants, and search helps disambiguate what we meant. Yes, we meant Moscone Center for the starting point, and yes, we meant the San Francisco Giants stadium for the ending point. We can jump to step 4 in the driving directions and actually get an up-close view of the sequence. We'll click on the arrow and it'll take you turn by turn within Street View, blending this search with the imagery that lets you see where you're navigating. So great imagery collection there, but even Street View is not where we wanted to stop. We also want to look at 3D space. You've got multi-story downtown buildings. Let's go to the Embarcadero Center in San Francisco as well. Here, as we zoom in, you've got photorealistic 3D buildings being streamed. You've got literally terabytes of data that are being accessible to people that are, go ahead and pan and tilt just to show the 3D photorealistic buildings. That level of detail is what we need to have people precisely annotate the planet with all kinds of local information that you may want to find. So if we could go back to the slides, please. So this is a summary of what it entails to create a base canvas for the planet for local search. We've got everything from the high and medium res satellite collection to aerial imagery to street view imagery. And as impressive of an effort it is to coordinate all this and bring it together, I think our engineers are most impressed by what users are doing on top of it. So now that we have the base canvas, how do we enable people to annotate that canvas, paint, and tell stories on that canvas? So that brings us to annotating the planet, how the Geoweb is expanding. If you picture that you've got 350 million unique user activations, more than that, unique users coming to Maps and Earth doing searches and local searches, more than 1,000 lifetimes spent looking at the planet, it's amazing what accomplishments arise from that. One of which is one of the most unbelievably comprehensive inventories of Bigfoot sightings in North America, complete with an animated timeline that apparently shows a peak in the 70s. Or people that, interestingly, are finding undiscovered Roman villas in their backyard. This fellow was looking at satellite imagery and found literally a buried Roman villa in his hometown. But then they range to useful things like a transit map for Santiago, or a road map for Buenos Aires, or an eco-tourism guide to Costa Rica, or a complete 3D model of the big Buddha on Lantau Island in Hong Kong, or an exquisitely detailed 3D model of Berlin City. But then there's also mundane things. If you're having a soccer meet and you want people to actually know how to get to the field, we have editable maps and editable categories that are a new introduction into local search. So we have Doug and Matt that are working on two parts of the problem. Doug's working on the problem of having a flexible categorization system that represent the long tail of businesses. Matt's working on the problem of local business center, of enabling people to get on the map instantaneously and classify and represent themselves how they'd like. So now things that are usually underrepresented, like a soccer field or a baseball field, can be added to the map by any user. There's also compelling narratives that really have much greater strength through the context of seeing the story in relation to the places on Earth. This is an effort from the Holocaust Memorials Museum that really accentuated the crisis in Darfur by telling a story with that geographic context. Just to get an overview of how much this Geoweb has been exploding over the past year, this is the picture, a heat map of May 2007, of all of the annotations that people have put on the planet for searchability. Let's just step through the sequence over this past year to see how that's expanded. And you can see by this May 2008, we've had a huge amount of growth of people telling their stories, painting this blank canvas with the geographic context that makes local search easy to understand. But if you assume that you've got all of this information now searchable, the next round of challenges is what's the user experience that enables you to find things and see them in context. You've got hundreds of millions of places with millions of users trying to look for those places. What kinds of innovations do you need in the user experience to enable that? So I thought we would do a demo of going to the place where some of this work is being done. Our Zurich team works on the server-side rendering of map tiles in response to search results that we'll take a look at now. So let's say we're going to go to Zurich and do a google.com query for Hotel Zurich. And thanks to Johanna, who you're going to hear from later around search quality, we get a nice universal result of hotel listings. But we actually want to see the geography around the hotels, because I'm interested in staying in a rural section outside of Zurich. Now, this may be unique to the Swiss, but they actually have another form of user-contributed content. He used 256 colors to represent the transit times on their public transit system within a 30-minute radius. So I think Swiss may be among the few that need 256 colors to describe 30 minutes of travel time. But an amazing visualization based on the public transit data of where you can stay within Zurich within a 30-minute commute. There's this Web 2.0 misperception that kind of user-contributed content is about social preening or kind of frivolous sharing, but there's actually a lot of really useful content that's annotating the planet. Take an example here. We can stay in Baden. So let's look for hotels in Baden and get transit straight to Zurich from that hotel in Baden. So one of the things that searches have, Dana can say, look, I want to go from Baden to Zurich, and specify it in the search box with that kind of simplicity. And you get not only the driving directions, but you can also click on public transit and get an aggregated view across 3 different transit agencies on what your options are right at the moment in planning your travel to Zurich. So the search results for the travel route are even better understood when they've got the context of photos from around the place. So if Dana can turn on the photo layer, we can see an example of this high-performance tile rendering that's happening in the background to have millions of photos accessible to millions of people as they pan and zoom for their particular map. So the kind of performance that you're seeing as Dana drags and zooms a map is made possible by this advanced technology. You might take a look at that river scene there. Yeah. So an amazing set of user experience challenges that all deal with kind of the high performance rendering of not only the search result, but the ability to see the search result in context of other information. So if we could go back to the slides. So we've covered some of the hard problems on getting the base canvas, how to get kind of people to be able to annotate that canvas, and some of the search user experience and visualizations that make it easier to understand results in the context of geographic location. But there are a lot of hard queries, some of which we're doing well on, but there's many more that we've got room for improvement. Take, for example, Greg Donaker and Howard Trickey. They're two of our engineers that focus obsessively on search quality. And there's some that I'm really proud of, like Beachfront Hotels Los Angeles, where by virtue of the work that Natan and Julian were doing to correlate a business with associated web content, we can find a good set of results for that query. Maybe we could go to demo to just walk through some of these hard queries. Could we switch to demo? So let's start with the Beachfront Hotels Los Angeles. The interesting thing, and the reason why this query is somewhat hard, is that the match for beachfront hotels is descriptive based on the clustered web pages with that listing. So by virtue of knowing the reference to that business, we're able to get a good set of results through that clustering. The second example, if we could do the second query, this is a very simple query. There's nothing algorithmically complex about matching a soccer field in Burlingame. The challenge is even having the soccer field in the index at all, and that goes back to the editable maps with that real-time updated index based on the millions of user additions that are being made. The third example is kind of the flexibility of interpreting your intent from your location. So let's start at San Francisco. And if you were to say, look, I'm trying to go from SFO airport to 1 Market Street, you can just type in from SFO to 1 Market Street. And out of the hundreds of market streets in the country, the proximity of your first location is used to influence the selection of your destination. So really trying to make it easy from a local search perspective to specify your query. Some of the other queries, we have room for improvement. If you take a query like Marin Headlands Hiking, what we try to do is blend the best content. But much like universal search has the challenge of picking the right blend of content, this is not optimal. We've got some hotels listings at the front. We've got some good user-contributed content in the middle. At the bottom, we have the Visitor Information Bureau, if you scroll down to the left, and the left nav search results. This, we'd like to improve. There's a lot of great web content that is geotagged for Marin Headlands, and a lot of the work that we're doing right now is in trying to determine when to blend which content. Another example of this is where we're a little too literal in our interpretation. If you type in Kansas State, you're thinking probably of the university. We literally give you a map of Kansas State. So this is another class of problem where we're working on the algorithms to give a variety of choices and interpretations of your local query. But even as we tackle some of these hard query problems, there's going to be a whole nother round of query problems. If you take a world where we can do a search for Embarcadero Center, for example. This I love, and we'll end on this demo, where we basically go from the 3D space perspective of these photorealistic buildings down into the search results for Street View. So if you could turn on Street View and then zoom into a particular spot, it kind of illustrates the next round of search challenges, even if we've addressed the current round. So Dana's going to fly into the ferry building, and you'll see that the transition from 3D to street level lets you be immersed in the scene. And once you're immersed in a scene, I think you can see a whole class of problems related to search that's going to crop up. Especially when you look at kind of the transient nature. Here we went straight from 3D straight to Street View. Something as transient as who's typically staffing a farmer's market. What are the parking restrictions on the street? What are the opening hours of places? All of this is going to open up a whole nother class of search challenges that I think we're all eager to tackle. So if we could go back to slides. You've seen some of the difficult problems, some of the advanced technologies to address those problems, and some of the content that's cropping up from the work to date. I hope that you all kind of have some insights into search and see that the end result is going to have all the world's information geographically organized, universally accessible and useful. And you've gotten some preview of what motivates the team that's working on this. So thank you very much, and I'll hand it back to Marissa. Thanks.
You know, we used to joke in the early days of Google about Google helping to find your keys. And with Carter's team and their work, I think that's becoming more and more of a reality every day. You've heard a lot this morning about all of our different search properties: maps, images, news, finance. And then, of course, there's web search, which really aims to wrap all of those together, especially with universal search, which we launched last year. Johanna Wright is our Director of Search Quality, and I would like her to come and give you an update on universal search, what we've achieved in the last year, and what is new and exciting in the area of search. So I'll hand it off to Johanna.
Thank you, Marissa. So I'm Johanna Wright, and this is how I spell broccoli. Thank goodness Google understands what I meant when I type in brocalli. I chose this example, although it's an early innovation at Google. I think it highlights our theme for today, and that is deeply understanding the user's intent. Here's what I said. That's what we get in the search team, just what the user types into the search box. But now it's our job within search to give you what it is that you really want and what it is that you really meant by this request to Google. I'm here today with two colleagues, engineering leaders in the search quality team. They're sitting in the back right now, Pandu Nayak and Tristan Upstill. And we're going to be talking about user intent and the variety of efforts in search quality in which we uncover what it is that the user is really meaning when they come to Google. First, I'm going to talk about universal search. And then Tristan's going to come out and he's going to describe the challenges that we have across the world in understanding queries. And then Pandu's going to show off some clever stuff where it's very hard, given the context that the user is, it's hard for us at Google to understand what the context is that the user is in when they type in their queries. So let's start with universal search. Universal search, you heard from RJ and you heard from Carter. So Carter talked about the Geoweb. RJ talked about our properties, images, news, finance. Universal search is the effort to bring all of these together into the search results page. Users should not need to know if the best result for their query sits in a book or if it sits in an image. We at Google just need to bring this to them in the search results page in an easy way for them to understand. And this graphic here represents what we launched last year. So you can see across the x-axis the properties that we launched: video, maps, news, books, and images. And this next graphic shows where we are today. In fact, I forgot to mention, so the y-axis is the relative frequency with which these show today. So if you go back one slide, this is where we were last year. And here's where we are today in terms of the frequency with which you will see these universal results. And today we've added in, can you go back one slide? And today we've added in products and blogs. So as you can see, you'll be seeing a lot more of universal search this year and currently when you're using Google. And why was this hard? And why are we talking about it today? Basically, there are three challenges that you see in universal search. There's infrastructure, there's ranking, and then there's user experience. And the easiest way, let's start with infrastructure. The easiest way to think about the infrastructure challenge is that if we need to give you the best answers from image search, the way that we know how to do this is to look in the image search index and see what results there are. But with a simple calculation, this takes about twice the computational power of web search right now. So we have to send all of those queries back to the image search index. And now if we add in 7 properties, well, that takes 7 times the computational power, 7 times the number of machines. And so you can imagine our engineers had to come up with something a bit smarter than this so that we could serve these results. The next challenge is ranking. And so that's just the issue of comparing apples to oranges. How can you compare an image to a news result? How can you compare a book to a video when both have great content? And again, this graph represents the hard work of the past year to improve our ranking algorithms so that you could see universal results when they're relevant in many more cases. And the final challenge is user experience. How do we bring this all together in a simple fashion such that it seems familiar to users when there's very rich content that we know about it because we have more detail about what type of content it is? And you all got a sneak peek at this slide, but the other thing that we've been hard at work doing this year is launching worldwide. So Universal Search is now available to our users around the globe. But I think the easiest way to understand Universal Search is just to go through a handful of examples to see what we've been at work with in the past year. So Redbones Barbecue is a restaurant in the town in which I grew up in. And last year, we included this result in the search results page. But this year, we've made a slight change, and that we've added the review content. So now we can see that Redbones is, in fact, as good as I remember it. It's got awesome food, and it's got big portions. But this next query, another local query, yoga in Kansas City, highlights the kind of challenge that we have within UI. Not all of the local results should be displayed the same way. And in fact, for broad queries, yoga, restaurants, pizza, we want to show, what we found is that the local results that we have and the local interests that users have are much more varied. And here, what is important to the users is seeing a group and understanding that there's more content that they can dig into. So this is a change that we made over the past year where we used to show the bare minimum, but now in these broad queries, we'll show you 10 results and highlight the fact that this is a group. This query may be interesting for those of you who like gadgets within the room. So this highlights the search quality's focus on what we call freshness, and that is looking at when did this concept occur? So in this case, there's a release around the BlackBerry Bold, and you can see that our focus on recency really helps Universal Search. So you see the news result, and then you can also see we've added in a blogs group in this past year, and our focus on understanding freshness helps us to introduce blogs in Universal Search. This query highlights some of the infrastructure work we've been doing in the past year. So basically, we've launched, within video, we've launched improvements to the video crawl. So now we see many, many more videos from many different sites. And the other thing we've launched is video sitemaps. And so it's a way for businesses that host videos to tell Google that they have those videos on their site. So in this first query, you see the how to bake naan results from Video Jug. And this is because they're telling us at Google, hey, we have great videos at this site. And I picked this query actually because, for another reason, and that is because somebody else told me about the query. And I have this problem working on search at Google, and that nobody understands what I do. And it's a big problem with my parents. They say things to me like, Johanna, you work on search? Search hasn't changed in 10 years. What do you do? And so someone gave me this example at a conference. They said, oh, you work on Universal Search? Well, I did the query for naan. And actually, my nanny did the query for naan, and she came up with a recipe for how to make naan, and then she actually watched the video online and then made us some naan. So I thought it was pretty cool because a user could articulate to us what they were seeing in our search results. This query, Lisa Leinbaugh, photographs, highlights the work of Universal Search, and I think this is one of the biggest improvements, and what you saw with the chart is that we're increasing coverage over the past year, and that's our term for how frequent these results show. Now last year when we launched, you would imagine a query like Ansel Adams or Annie Leibovitz. Of course, Google should understand for famous photographers that we should show images. But now we're really focusing on the long tail, and less popular photographers will show up in the search results. And this really gets to one of the user intent challenges that we see at Google. So we talk about, and the topic of this speech here is understanding user intent. But we don't want to just understand user intent broadly. We want to understand the user intent of each and every user and on each and every query. And in fact, this query here, voolich, wright, is a query that I think only one person in the world issues. That's me. This is my son's name. And last year, we didn't do so well on this query. But this year, you can see that Google has done much better on these deep queries. And here we have videos and blogs blended right into the results page. And while that past query for my son was an indication of seeing multiple types of content on the page, here you can see that in these two cases, there's many more results from different corpuses showing together. So on the left, with kangaroos jumping, you can see the pictures, but also you see a video, because if you type in kangaroo jumping, you probably want to see what it's like when the kangaroo actually jumps. And this also has a books result incorporated at the bottom. For Mexico City, you see maps, news, videos, all together in the same results page in a very simple to read fashion. And my final picture is and set of examples of our work launching worldwide. And this has actually been a lot of work for the engineering team, and we're really proud of our efforts in this area. And I wanted to leave with that. It's a good time to introduce Tristan. Tristan is an engineering leader here in search quality, and he runs our international search quality efforts. And it's always really amazing to me the breadth of the impact of the work of Tristan's team. And so he's going to talk to you about understanding users' intent across the world.
Thank you. As Johanna mentioned, I'm an engineer here on the international search quality team. Our team consists of engineers who've come together from all over the world with one singular purpose in mind: to build the best search experience for everyone, everywhere, no matter what languages they speak. Most of what we do happens under the hood here at Google, refining, researching, developing, and deploying new algorithms to improve our international search experience. And in many ways, give our users more, even when they tell us less. So what I'd like to do today is just step through some examples of our search localization and take a quick dip into some of the new things we've been looking at recently. So a little bit of background on me might help before we go through these slides here. I have a somewhat varied background, although it's not that varied compared to a lot of people in my team. I was born in France. I lived in Australia for 20 years, or more than 20 years, 25 years. I don't really want to go into my age. And then I spent a year in the UK and then came out to the US for work. So I've learned that the saying that there's death and taxes is at least true in 3 countries: the US, the UK. Well, actually, I haven't learned about death, but I know that the tax bit is true in the US, Australia, and the UK. So if you're going to pay your tax in the US, which most people do, the 3-letter acronym that you need to know before you kick it off is the IRS. And so if you search for tax on google.com, you get the IRS result at position 1. Then this is followed up with some forms and publications from the IRS, which you need to submit with your tax return. And finally, a nice page which has a history of taxation around the world. By contrast, if you search for tax in the UK, you get Her Majesty's Revenue and Customs Service, so you make your checks out to Her Majesty in the UK. Then you get the Wikipedia result, which once again has informational resources about the history of tax, and finally some information about how to pay tax in the UK. And if we go further down the pages in these cases, we'll see that the localized results continue with services which will help you pay your tax in these regions, etc. By contrast, if we search in Australia, we no longer have to pay tax to Her Majesty directly in Australia. Instead, we pay tax to the Australian Tax Office. And the ATO in Australia has a special e-filing service, which we can see here in the second result. Once again, in the third result, we have our informational history of taxation. So this not only works for queries that are in the head of our query stream, like tax, but it also works for queries in the tail. So sticking with the taxation theme, if you were to search for tax calendar, tax year, tax dates, in all of these cases, you get local results. And it's very important that they are local, because otherwise all your dates will be wrong. Outside of tax, this holds for all sorts of things, like whether you want to find out about schools in your country, the school system, or even things like what time of year you should plant your tomatoes, because if you use the US system in Australia, you're completely hosed. So moving beyond country localization to language localization. So when we deal with language localization, we have this tricky problem of counterbalancing readability with relevance. And we can see that illustrated here with the query Enrique Iglesias in Russia. I guess he's hot there right now. So as we can see, Enrique is a good-looking bloke, which is good, so we lead with photos of Enrique. Then we have his navigational result at the second position. So this is his official website. It has news about Enrique, his blog postings, probably when he's touring all the countries around the world, and if you're lucky, a few more photos. Then we have some Russian information results at positions 2, 3, and 4. And then we're lucky enough to see a web video in there as well. And this illustrates something that's very important, which is that we're not only localizing our web corpus, but we're localizing all of our corpuses, such that when we do want to do universal search, we can do it and understand readability, or in the case of videos, watchability across all the languages. So let's step back for a second. I've shown you 3 countries and 2 languages. That's kind of cute. But what we do here at Google is over 100 languages in over 150 countries. So if you're in Vanuatu or Trinidad and Tobago or Botswana and you want to search in Indonesian or Swahili, then we're giving you the best localized information we possibly can. So another part of our strategy here at Google is thinking about ways in which we can unlock the content from larger languages on the web for the smaller languages. So for example, we know that the number of Arabic users on the internet is growing faster than the amount of Arabic content on the web. So part of our strategy is to work out ways in which we can make the much larger languages on the web readable to speakers of the much smaller languages. And Udi introduced a key part of this effort last year, which was the cross-language search system. So going a little further on this, in the past year, we've taken this right into the search results. So if you're searching for Bermuda Triangle in Arabic, which of course I can't do, so this query at the top is says Bermuda Triangle in Latin for our benefit. Our algorithms will go through the search results, detect that the results in Arabic are okay, but maybe there are some better results in English, and seamlessly insert a link at the bottom of the page, which will take you directly to the cross-language search results, which is this link down here at the bottom, which says it has the translation as well as the Arabic text. And then we pop straight to the cross-language search results page. And here we hope that our Arabic users can extract some more useful information about the Bermuda Triangle. So something that I'm super excited about that we've been working on this year is thinking about localization beyond country and beyond language. So I guess something which I hadn't realized when I first moved to the US was just how big and how culturally distinct the areas of this country are. And that if I'm going to go on a driving holiday, it's probably just as likely that I'll go to Canada or Mexico as it is that I'll go to New York or somewhere else on the East Coast. So we're moving in the direction right now of something that I refer to as sub-country localization, but is more easily referred to as metro localization. So say our user is in the Los Angeles metro area and puts in a somewhat vague query, and they ask for a zoo. Here we'll lead with the San Diego Zoo, which is an extremely well-known, world-famous zoo. And it's only a couple of hours down the coast from the LA, so it's likely that our users will be willing to go there for a day trip. We then have the LA Zoo, which is also a good zoo in LA, and then we have other zoos from around the country. By comparison, if you were to search for a zoo in the Seattle metropolitan area, we would lead straight off the bat with the Woodland Park Zoo in Seattle, which is a great zoo and isn't going to require 3 days of driving to get to. But if you're up for a longer road trip, we'll stick again with the San Diego Zoo, the world-famous zoo, and then have other local zoos around the other important zoos around the country. But this works well for vague queries like zoo, where maybe you're willing to go on a day trip. It doesn't work so well if you're after a pizza. So if you're in LA and you ask for a pizza, then you don't really want to have to drive to San Diego to pick up your pizza. So something which is, I should mention that the zoo localization I spoke about in the last example is something that will be rolling out over the next couple of months, and you'll hear more about it then. This, by comparison, went live, I think, last week. So if you're searching for pizza, it's unlikely, searching for pizza in LA, it's unlikely that you're going to be willing to drive to San Diego to pick up your pizza. So what we have now is a local universal which doesn't require a location every single time you search. So the first time you search for something that we detect or our algorithms detect is a very local query. We'll prompt you for a location or a zip code. And if you go ahead and enter that, will give you results for the zip code that you've entered. So I've gone along here and entered where I live, which is Palo Alto, and I now have a list of all the pizza joints around Palo Alto, and my personal favorite, the California Pizza Kitchen, which is very cool. Now, what we'll do from now on is actually store this zip code, and every time you search for something that's very, very local, say coffee or schools or libraries, we'll give you all the local results around your zip code. So I hope in talking to you briefly today about some of these examples and dipping into some of the new things we're looking at, I've managed to convince you to some extent of how much we believe in providing the very best search experience for everyone, everywhere, and we want to break down all the language boundaries such that it doesn't matter what languages that our users speak. And now I'd like to hand off to Pandu, who is both a gentleman and a scholar, and is going to tell you about queries that are hard to understand.
Thank you, Tristan. So as Tristan said, I'm going to tell you about these queries that are much harder to understand than normal. Now, that's not actually quite true. As we'll see, most of these queries are actually quite easy to understand if you happen to be a human being. If, on the other hand, you happen to be a computer, then it's significantly more challenging. And our group as a whole is working very hard to take some of the understanding that humans seem to display with such ease and translate them into computer algorithms that would allow for us to understand our search queries much more effectively and provide users great search results. So let me illustrate the kinds of things we've been doing with a series of examples. So here's a query from a user asking for Dr. Zhivago. And I think we're all quite sure that when the user typed Dr., they really meant doctor. And apparently the search results got the right interpretation, and we do in fact get the results about Dr. Zhivago. You're probably thinking, oh yeah, this is fairly straightforward. Dr. is always doctor. And you'd be right, except of course when it's not. Right? So in this particular case, the user is probably not looking for Dr. Burton Green in Rodeo. In this case, they're probably looking for the Burton Green who was the investor who at the turn of the last century invested in that property of land and actually named Rodeo Drive what it is. So in this case, Dr. actually means drive, not doctor. So now you're probably thinking, oh yeah, I forgot about that one. It's clear that Dr. means either drive or doctor. And that would also be right, except of course when it's not. And in this case, when you're looking for the best beaches in DR, it's neither drive nor doctor. In fact, you mean the Dominican Republic. Now, the tricky thing here, or I guess the point of these examples is that as users come to expect more and more from Google, they really talk to us in a more conversational manner and feel free to use language the way it's meant to be. Which means that words in their queries can mean lots of different things. And if we are to support them effectively and give them great search results, we need to understand all the different things that words might mean. And of all these things, many of which are not going to be in dictionaries like this meaning here. And of all the various things that it might mean, we need to pick out the right meaning in a given context to figure out exactly what the user wants. So that's one key piece of understanding the vocabulary that users use. Here's a second example. Search queries that come to us are not just sets of words, collections of words. In fact, they're actually collections of concepts. So this query here that you see is really asking for information about Times Square in New York. So it's like a two-concept query, if you will. And those are the two concepts there. And as you can see, the search results correctly get that interpretation that it's Times Square in New York. The interesting point here is that none of us really thought that the user was looking for information about squares in the New York Times. And that would be right, except of course when it's not. So in this particular case, presumably the user is looking for information about squaring the circle in the New York Times. And in fact, all of the results sort of take that interpretation. You can see that the first result, for example, is about this age-old problem started by the Greeks on how you can find a circle that has the same area as a square, or rather the other way around, a square having the same area as a circle, using just a straight edge and a compass. And there's an article on the New York Times talking about this. There are a couple of other interpretations that they also that the results also get, including the circle and the square theater, and even an old movie called The Square Circle. The point here is that when we get queries, we can't do the naive thing of just thinking of them as collections of words. We really need to understand the concepts that are embedded in those queries. And the concepts that are embedded in those queries are very context dependent, and we need to figure out the right sort of breakdown into concepts. And if we can do that, we can provide search results that are really great for users. So a third kind of thing is illustrated by this query here. So looking at this query, it's pretty clear to all of us what's going on here. The user is planning a trip to a vacation, probably to Carmel. They want to stay at the Normandy Inn, and they're looking to see whether the inn is available on the days of their vacation. Seems fairly straightforward. The only problem with this query is that the Normandy Inn does not have online reservations. And so there are no good pages out there that provide the user the information they want about the availability. If we were to do the naive thing and simply return to the user results that had all of the words in the query, then we would get terrible search results like this. We would in fact give them results about the Carmel Mission Inn instead of the Normandy Inn, which the user really wanted. If instead we understand the user intent, if we understand what the user really wants, which is to make a reservation at the Normandy Inn, then these are the results which we actually do return that actually drive the user to the Normandy Inn homepage. The user can then go to the homepage, see that there is no online reservations, see a phone number, call them, and presumably go on to have a great vacation in Carmel. So this is another example where really understanding what the user wants is more important than the literal words that they provide us. And by being careful about that, you can provide them great results. And for my final example on this theme is perhaps my most favorite example of this set, which is this query. The user is asking for the Wild Wolf Water Resort in Niagara Falls, Ontario, which sounds pretty clear what they want, except there's a small catch here. There is no Wild Wolf Water Resort in Niagara Falls. In fact, the resort that they're looking for is called the Great Wolf Lodge Water Park. It's not the Wild Wolf Water Resort. So we happen to realize that in fact there is no Wild Wolf Water Resort, and in fact there is this other water park called the Great Wolf Lodge Water Park right in Niagara Falls. And so we ensure that there are enough results in the result set about the Great Wolf Lodge. Presumably the user sees this discrepancy, notices, aha, that's actually what I was looking for, and clicks on these results, and is presumably has a happy day at the water park with their kids. So the long and the short of this is that understanding what the user really wants is very, very crucial to providing great search results. This is something that we're working very hard at. It's a very challenging problem, but it's what makes it fun to come to work every day. And with that, I'm going to hand it back to Johanna to wrap up. Thank you.
Thank you, Pandu. I'm really glad that you guys got to hear from Pandu today. His work on these queries is some of the stuff that I think is the cleverest that we see in search quality. And when I started at Google, here's a story. I met Pandu, and I was so excited to be meeting these engineers in search at Google. And he was then also working on something very interesting around solving the user's intent. And I went home to tell my husband about it. Here we were getting queries, and then for similar queries, putting those in the results set. And my husband said, oh yeah, I saw that. That's when I type in goose liver, I see results for foie gras in the middle of the page. And I thought that was pretty cool. And it was just a glimpse of the really neat stuff that goes on with the engineering team and search quality. And to close, I wanted to end with another story from when I started at Google, which is much more about why I like working in this team, and really around the theme of today, which is understanding our user's intent. And that is, part of the reason I really like working in search is that all of the engineers here are very, very dedicated to serving our users' needs, and we're a very, very user-focused team. So when I got to Google, it was after Google Book Search had launched, and Google Book Search was just starting to get a lot of really good content. Now, it was before Universal Search had launched, so we didn't have a way to show this content in the search results page. So what we did is we just added a link at the bottom of the page that said, try your query on Google Book Search. Now, while a lot of the time this link was great, but for the millions and millions of queries that we got to web search, it wasn't always true that there was content in Google Book Search. And seeing a link on the page that doesn't lead you to a good result is the kind of thing that just drives a search quality engineer at Google batty. And so one engineer who wasn't on the project, but was working in search quality, saw this, was really upset about it, and quickly worked up an algorithm and launched it such that we would only show this link when there were relevant content within Google Book Search. And I like that story because it was my first glimpse at what a strong user orientation the search quality group had at Google. And it's just one thing I really like about coming to work every day is that no matter what disagreements we have, it's clear that those of us who are working on search serve one master, and that's our millions of users. And with that, I'll hand it back to Marissa.
Thanks. I want to thank all of our speakers from this morning. I think this gives you a glimpse into why search is hard, but that's one of the things that makes it really interesting. As part of the core search experience for Google, we've always thought of 4 components. Comprehensiveness, do we have all of the information? Freshness, do we have the newest information that's being generated on a topic? Relevance, can we produce exactly what you want out of that whole set of information? And overall user experience. And you heard all 4 of these themes echoed throughout the 3 presentations this morning. So for example, when you hear from RJ, if we can go back to the slides. I think, are we reset? You heard from RJ that we are producing 100 billion images per year. That's a huge amount of data, and that brings to bear all kinds of questions about comprehensiveness and freshness. How do we get all those images as they appear onto the web and searchable? And then how do we apply new relevance technologies like facial recognition to those images such that your results get more and more accurate for what you're searching for? And then also looking at things like the overall user experience on image search. It's one of our biggest properties. It's one that we would like to monetize, but we want to do so in a way that actually, even beyond leaving the user experience neutral, actually improves it. How can we introduce advertising in a way that ultimately improves your image search experience? So this is the 100 billion images per year. Facial recognition and ads on image search. These are some of the things that we're beginning to experiment with and get started on to try and understand how best to improve user experience. And then taking some of those much more elaborate notions of comprehensiveness, freshness, and relevance, and improving user experience by introducing them into things like news and allowing people to search our news database for quotes from notable people. These are all things that are particularly exciting. Carter covered a lot of the same topics. Comprehensiveness. How do we get all of the world's information? As well as a better understanding of relevance. When I type New York, New York, and I'm outside of Las Vegas, I mean something different than when I type it in Las Vegas, and I'm actually referring to the hotel. These are basically notions of relevance and how we can ultimately improve our local searches. Our user-generated content that's occurring on our geo products, of course, brings up a new element of freshness. So as we've had more and more users contribute over time to our body of data, it ultimately means we can have fresher results. So should an intersection be closed, should a road change, should a building change, we have that information as close to real time as possible, really allowing us to have that mirror of the world. And then, of course, there's the user experience additions we've seen of late on our geo products in the way of the 3-dimensional buildings, as well as our 3D to street view transition, which Carter demonstrated for the first time this morning, are things that we think can really enhance the user experience. And when you think about what Street View can do in terms of driving directions, if you're wondering how to get somewhere, you might not just need to look at a list of written instructions. You might actually be able to drive the route first on your computer so you know exactly what you're looking for. It could really change the way that these directions overall, that these work. Then we heard from Johanna about how all of that content is coming to bear inside of web search. And you can see where we were last year versus where we are this year. So you can see that last year we did a complete overhaul of the search engine, changing out the infrastructure, the relevance algorithms, and the user experience to incorporate these different types of media into our search results page. And here you can see how much we've actually expanded on that. This is in terms of frequency of these types of results appearing in your search results. So this is happening more and more over time as our engineers are getting more and more accurate with their relevance notions. How can we build in a new set of ideas around image search? How can we build in a new set of ideas around news? And this type of expansion will continue to occur as we understand the information better. And then, in terms of user experience, there's the ever-elusive user intent. Here's what I said, now give me what I meant. And you heard from Tristan and from Pandu how hard and interesting a problem that is. It's something that changes all the time and every day. Which really brings us to the future of search. And I think when you look at the future of search, there's a couple of things that are really notable that we've touched on today. The first is that we imagine search in the future will be experienced through many new modes. Cell phones, cars. It's interesting because if anyone in the world is a search addict who searches as much as they possibly can, I have to be pretty close to it. I search all the time, every day. Yet I would guess that I probably only do searches on about 20% of what I'm interested in. Why? Because a lot of the searches that I think of happen when I'm on the go or in the car. And as we think about how we could actually take our search technology and make it viable by cell phone and by car, it becomes particularly interesting. It also adds new layers of complexity. So if you can think about Carter's work on geo, it actually gets even more complex. If someone's moving or if someone is on the go, how can you take that context of where they are and bake that into a better experience on our geo products and on web search overall? There's also, of course, the concept of media. How do we pull in all the different media that RJ and his teams work with? News, images, trends, and display those as best we can on web search, really creating these kinds of interconnections between products. You've seen how in just one short year we've expanded the different types of content and the frequency with which they occur in web search, and we anticipate being able to do that even more in the future. And finally, there's the element of personalization. We think that in the future, one way we'll get to the answer of did you mean Dominican Republic, did you mean doctors, or did you mean drive, is by knowing a little bit more about you and being able to build that into the search engine to ultimately tailor the relevance of your results, yielding better results and a better user experience for you overall. So we are very excited about where we are in search today and what the future holds. But from our standpoint, as you can tell, we're just getting started. And on the topic of just getting started, as well as on the topic of comprehensiveness and personalization, I want to transition from search to Google Health. So you've heard us talk a lot about Google Health over the last while. So Google Health is our product that attempts to take our users' medical records and bring them online, where users can see them and control them and put them to good use in getting better health care. This is not an easy initiative. It makes sense for Google to take this on because we've seen over time that the majority of internet users, when they look for health information online, start with search. When they try and learn something about their health, they start with search. And the lion's share of that 66% comes to Google. So this is one reason we've been interested in health, but it's a big project. And it's a big project that you've heard about from us for a long time. You can see these are all the different times that we've talked about health, and they can span now almost a year of build up and trying to talk about what are we doing in health, why do we think that it's important, why do we think that this is something that's worthy not only for Google, but for our users. And I'm happy to say today that it's no more just talk. We actually have the product. It is live at www.google.com/health. You can sign up today. It is open to the public. And it's a really exciting day for us. We're very happy to finally be able to offer this service to our users. And we'd like to demonstrate it for all of you. So I'm going to invite Ronnie Ziegler up to the stage. Ronnie is our product manager for Google Health. He's also a doctor, Stanford educated, UCSF resident, who we plucked from his practice to come and help us build out Google Health. He still practices medicine occasionally on the weekends in his 20% time. And we're going to go ahead and show you Google Health. So Ronnie's going to tell us today about our friend Diana.
Thank you, Marissa. It's really an honor to be here talking about this. So here we are with our friend Diana. She is a pretty healthy person, but she has several health problems that many of us can relate to. And she just got started using Google Health to try to organize her health information.
So what happens if Diana gets something new?
Perfect question. Let's say Diana just got a sinusitis. And let's do exactly what Diana could do by entering it herself into Google Health. And Marissa, help me out. What's a good antibiotic for sinusitis, assuming, of course, that it's caused by a bacterial infection?
Amoxicillin.
All right. I'm pretty impressed. And that's actually the same thing that I would have said. Partly because I also was not aware of her allergy to penicillin. Fortunately, that had previously been put into her Google Health profile. So we can actually give her a tip here that says she might have a bad reaction to amoxicillin. Let's go back to her homepage. Now, I know one of the things that you're thinking is, this is really nice to be able to enter information yourself, but does that scale? Will users really want to enter all of their conditions in when we know that they already exist electronically in many places, such as their pharmacies? So if we go to the details of her medications, for example, we see, in fact, that some of them were imported from Beth Israel Deaconess Medical Center in Boston, some from RX America, and some from Walgreens Pharmacy.
That's great. Does that mean that as of today I can import all of these different records into my Google Health profile if I have prescriptions at Walgreens or other partners?
It's absolutely true, and it's quite remarkable. As of right now, if you have records at any of these providers, you can sign up for Google Health and start the process of importing your records. Now, one thing that we learned that was actually a little bit of a surprise to us is that users wanted help from us directly finding out more about common problems that they have, such in this case, such as chickenpox. So if I pop open this page that we've built for them about chickenpox, come on, internet tubes. Okay. We see that we have useful overview information. In my opinion, beautiful photographs. I'm going to spare you popping them up because I'll get some hollers of gross. But if you're on your own time, if you're like me, please do so. Relevant results from Google properties such as Google Scholar for research articles, discussion groups, and Google News. And a convenient shortcut to add this directly to your Google Health profile if you happen to find this page, for example, in some search results.
So this really puts the user's records right in their hands where they can see them, they can control them, and have access to them. And it seems like this will ultimately make a big difference, especially for people who travel or move around, because they can keep their records with them.
That's right. And before we go further, one thing I do want to comment on is to make a quick point about privacy, which I know is a common question that a lot of us have. So Google Health cares about privacy and puts it in the control of each user. The user decides who, if anyone, should have access to her records and can revoke that access at any time. We will not sell any user's data, and we won't share it with anyone unless Diane, in this case, specifically asks us to. Now, the most exciting part, in my opinion, about Google Health is this notion of online health services. So Diana, for example, is worried about her risk of a heart attack. So she has connected, in the same way that she connected to Beth Israel and Walgreens, she is connected to the heart attack risk calculator from the American Heart Association. Now, because she decided to securely connect with them, they have already filled out their questionnaire with data from her Google Health profile. So when she goes over to their application, notice that she's already on step 8 of 10 because she didn't have to fill out her weight, her height, her age, her LDL cholesterol, her HDL cholesterol, etc. And she can go straight to where the action is. For example, here, she can see that she, according to the American Heart Association, has about a 27% chance of having a heart attack in the next year. And she can check, for example, if she were to improve her cholesterol a little bit further, big drop. Also some benefit from working harder on her blood pressure. And no surprise, perhaps the most important thing she can do is quit smoking.
This is great. This is all available today.
This is all available today. We have an amazing start of services that you can see here. In addition to the heart attack risk calculator, there's a virtual pill box that does neat things like send you SMS alerts if you want them when it's time to take a pill. A personalized news service that can give you news tailored precisely to your health profile if you wish. A immunization dashboard that can pull the immunizations that you or your daughter or son have had and remind you which CDC recommended medications haven't yet been taken. And a couple of services actually that can take your paper medical records that are in your filing cabinets right now and convert them into electronic format and allow you to import them into your Google Health record.
That's great. This is a really exciting start.
And I have to say, there are some amazing features there, some amazing services, but I truly believe that the most interesting and innovative ones are the ones that we haven't seen or even thought of yet.
That's right. Great. Thanks, Ronnie. Can we go back to the slides? So as Ronnie demonstrated, we have a lot of partners already participating in Google Health. On this slide, you'll see the logos of some of the partners that we have participating today. And we wouldn't have gotten this far without our partner participation. And many of those people are in the room. So we wanted to invite a few of them to the stage to give us their views on what Google Health can do in terms of this partnership. So first, I'd like to invite Dr. Stephen Suffren, the Chief Corporate Medical Officer from Quest, to come up. It's interesting, Quest does a large majority of the tests that are lab tests nationwide. Until I started working on Google Health, I didn't realize that my own lab results were in Quest and are now importable into Google Health. Welcome.
Pleasure, thank you. I've noticed that the floor here gets a great deal of workout from speakers who have been very dynamic unless they're tied to, in fact, the computer. I'm not one of those. I have the opportunity today to deliver a short time, a message to you, and so I've taken the opportunity to make sure that I get it down by writing it down for you. And you now all know that I'm Dr. Stephen Suffren, and I'm the Corporate Chief Medical Officer for Quest Diagnostics. But what you don't know is how proud I am to be here today to help mark this pivotal moment in the history of healthcare, which is the launch of Google Health. With the advent of Google Health, physicians and patients have acquired a powerful new channel for communicating healthcare information, including critical laboratory diagnostic data. It's diagnostic laboratory information that is one of the foundational elements of any medical record, and it's this laboratory information that allows physicians to make targeted, effective decisions that intervene in healthcare. Without accurate diagnostic laboratory data, a health record would be a tracker of prescriptions, an itinerary of office visits, a diary of hospital stays. But for a personal health record to serve as a verification of wellness, a tool for documenting and supporting accuracy and specificness of medical diagnosis, then an important asset in tracking therapy, these diagnostic laboratory data must be an essential portion of that medical record. At Quest Diagnostics, we're proud to play an integral role in this forward leap in the ability to communicate diagnostic laboratory data that the launch of Google Health represents. Through Google Health, more than 100,000 physicians who use Quest Diagnostics Care 360 connectivity products can now share and explain diagnostic laboratory data with their patients in a secure online setting. By understanding these data, patients that use Google Health will have a better opportunity to communicate with their physicians about the laboratory test results and more effectively participate in decisions involving their healthcare. Google Health represents a vision that Google and Quest Diagnostics and the other healthcare organizations here today all share, and that is that an effort to empower patients to make well-informed healthcare decisions needs to provide them with timely and accurate information about the diagnostic and therapeutic circumstances they all face. As a physician who's been involved with various spots within the Quest organization in the last decade, I believe that no other company is as well prepared to provide the foundational diagnostic laboratory data that will make our joint vision of an improved and enhanced patient-physician interaction a reality. Quest Diagnostics, for those of you who don't know, is the world's largest diagnostic testing services company. We serve 50% of all the physicians in the United States, and we perform more than 500,000 specimen determinations for patients every single day. Our laboratories were the first in the industry to take on the quality improving principles of Six Sigma and Lean, and our 900 physicians and doctoral level scientists have world renown in fields as diverse as cardiovascular disease, metabolic disorders, and cancer. And we are leading developers of new technology in the fields of diagnostic testing. Google and Quest Diagnostics working together will be able to help physicians and patients collaborate as they have never before been able in making healthcare decisions. A better informed patient is, in my experience, more likely to take the steps necessary to secure more individualized and effective health care. And Google Health, ultimately, is about helping each of us live a healthier life. We at Quest Diagnostics are proud to be a founding partner in this effort. Thank you.
Thanks. And we're very excited to be working with Quest. In addition to being able to get your lab results online, we've also formed partnerships with various pharmacies so you can see your prescriptions online. And I'd like to welcome Casey Kozlowski from Walgreens, who is their lead on all healthcare IT initiatives, to talk about the partnership. Thanks.
Well, yes, I'm Casey Kozlowski. I'm with Walgreens. I'm a pharmacist, and I've been with Walgreens for the past 11 years. The first 8 years of my career were spent behind the counter, filling prescriptions and counseling patients. And currently I work in our healthcare innovations area, managing our health information technology projects, including personal health records and the like. So I'd like to start by saying how very excited we are to be a part of this launch. I really think Google Health is going to be a great thing, and we're so very proud to kind of be there in the beginning and a part of this. As a pharmacist, having an incomplete or an inaccurate drug list for a patient makes it much harder to do your job. You can't perform a drug interaction check on a drug that you don't know exists. And this has actually happened close to home recently. A friend of mine's mother was actually hospitalized due to a drug interaction. She's a Walgreens patient and ended up getting her prescription filled at another pharmacy, which probably was her first mistake, right? But and that pharmacy didn't have her complete drug profile, and they didn't realize that one of her maintenance medications had a very severe drug interaction. So she ended up getting the script filled, taking it, and now is having some severe liver failure, and it might possibly need a transplant. So had that pharmacy had the complete profile and had all the medications that she'd been taking, this could have been avoided. Obviously, this is an extreme case, but it's just a way to show how we can make a difference by having all this data available to all healthcare practitioners, doctors, pharmacies, and the like. It's only going to help create better care for everyone. For pharmacists, patient care is really the #1 priority. I don't know many pharmacists who went into this field because they really like putting pills from a big bottle into a little bottle. So it's it's all about taking care of the patient. So, and with Google Health, I think what we're getting is a more engaged patient, a patient that's taking an active role in their health care and that really wants to see themselves get better, manage their disease states, look up their medications that they're taking, and make sure there aren't any drug interactions or with over-the-counter medications. So that's really what I think will have the greatest impact, is really getting patients involved in their own health care. So then, the new Google Health effort will lead to patients and their healthcare practitioners getting better access to patient medical information. So more informed patient and more informed doctors will lead to fewer harmful drug interactions and patients getting the most benefit from their drug therapy. And in closing, Walgreens has had a long history of pharmacy innovation. We were the first pharmacy to install a satellite-connected pharmacy computer system where all of our locations were linked in the early 1980s. To inventing the electronic prescription in the early 1990s, to having the first online website integrated with retail pharmacy locations. And today, we're taking another innovative step with Google Health, and we're very excited about it. Thank you.
Thanks. What Google Health is really about is pulling together information from your doctor's office, from labs, from pharmacies, all together to get a holistic picture. And we've been really lucky to have a great health advisory board headed up by one of the holistic medicine specialists in the world, Dr. Dean Ornish, founder of the Preventive Medical Research Institute. And I'd like to ask Dean to come up and talk a little bit about his collaboration through the advisory board.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Great to see you. I'm Dean Ornish. I'm a clinical professor of medicine at UCSF and the founder and president of the nonprofit Preventive Medicine Research Institute. And for the past 18 years, I've had the privilege of working with Marissa and colleagues chairing the Google Health Advisory Council, which includes 23 of the top health and medical experts from around the country. People like Dr. Toby Cosgrove, who's the CEO of the Cleveland Clinic, represented here by Dr. Martin Harris, their Chief Information Officer, and Dr. Mike Roizen, a longtime friend who's also their Chief Wellness Officer. People like Dr. John Halamka, who's the Chief Information Officer at Harvard Medical School and Beth Israel Deaconess Medical Center, and as well as representatives, the heads of the American Medical Association, the ARP, and other privacy experts. Many of these people, along with the partners listed up on the screen, will be available during breakout sessions during lunch if you want to talk with them. I'm excited by this because it really empowers people with getting more control over their own information as well as having better access to it. And as Ronnie Zeiger mentioned, we're proud of what we've done so far, but it's just the beginning and look forward to more in the future. Thank you.
Thanks. So we didn't have time today to obviously bring all of our partners up here onto the stage, but I want to thank all of them because this has been a really profound effort. We've come a long way, and the service that we're offering our users today with these integrations is already very powerful. That said, we realize this is just the beginning. There are literally thousands of additional partnerships that need to be formed, petabytes of information that need to be brought online digitally and put in the hands of the patient, right? It's crazy that Seinfeld clip that we showed on the break still applies, right? How many people here have actually seen or touched their medical record? A few, mostly the doctors in the room. But that really shouldn't be the case in this information age. You really should be able to have that information. It's so relevant to you, and it can make such a big difference in your life and in your healthcare. And that's what Google Health is really about. Happier, healthier users with access to the information that's most important to them to get good healthcare. And on that note, related but separate from Google Health, we have one final announcement today, which is something that came out of our collaboration with Cleveland Clinic and is also at Healthier Users, which is our Walk for Good campaign. In the spirit of wellness, we have worked with the Cleveland Clinic to develop a Google gadget that sits and becomes part of your iGoogle page, but it's actually part of a broader wellness campaign to get our users walking, get them out, get them taking advantage of the warmer and happier weather, and making a difference in their health every day. So you can sign up as of today for our Walking for Good campaign. You can add walking to iGoogle, and you keep track of your walking over the next 15 weeks. And if you achieve a certain point in the program, we'll allow you to vote for a charity where we'll make a $100,000 donation come the fall. And so by signing up for this, you'll see it drop into your iGoogle page. like this. And we have Dr. Michael Roizen from the Cleveland Clinic, the Chief Wellness Officer for Cleveland that helped us develop this gadget, here to talk a little bit more about it. Welcome.
Thank you. I'm the Chief Wellness Officer of the Cleveland Clinic, and I think I'm the only Chief Wellness Officer, the first at any major medical center. I focused my medical career, my medical practice on prevention and wellness for 37 years. So the Cleveland Clinic and I are excited to be partnering with Google. If anyone can demystify what wellness is, and if anyone can make it fun, enjoyable, and give the user what they want, which is an easy way of staying well, getting well, and having fun while doing it, Google can. So we're really proud to be with you. The Cleveland Clinic has done a lot for wellness. It really believes in wellness. It's more than a mission, it's a passion. For the last 3 years, we've in fact stopped hiring smokers, made the campuses smoke-free, and don't allow trans fats to sneak into patients' or employees' food. And now we've started investing heavily in our employee wellness activities. So as a healthcare organization, we believe we have to practice what we preach. We believe that, in fact, the big idea is that 70% of how long and well you live are your choices, not your genes. You get to nudge your genes, and Dean's done a great deal of work on this. You get to nudge your genes so that you can live much healthier, with much more vitality, and much longer than you ever thought possible. And the most important thing you can do is daily physical activity. Whether it is in the long-lived populations of Okinawa or Crete or Hawaii, and they all have different diets and different activities, but the one activity they all share in common is vigorous physical daily activity. And everyone can do that. The best physical activity, and we've said it on TV, on Oprah, and we say it in the U-books, and we say it to patients daily at the Cleveland Clinic. The best physical activity you can do is daily walking. It's pretty easy. It is without fear of injury, and virtually everyone can do it. If you walk 2 hours a week, just 2 hours a week, you decrease the risk of all-cause mortality compared to your peers by 39%. 3 to 4 hours, and you decrease that risk by 54%. So it's really a huge benefit from just walking. But not all walking is created equal. That is, you've got to have a reasonable pace, and you've got to spice it up, or you'll stop doing it. And that's where Google comes in, because Google, in fact, is the one that can make walking fun. The Walk for Good is the tool or the gadget that, in fact, allows everyone to walk, to set targets, and from beginner to advanced person, everyone can set targets and go to achieving their results. And setting targets is also critical. Now, walking is just one of those targets. There are many of them, but it is the most important target. So Cleveland Clinic and Google are happy that we can, in fact, offer this to everyone. It's a tool that will allow people to set targets, to hit them, and to understand how much fun it is to get well. So I hope all of you will, in fact, join me and encourage others to go for good. Thank you.
Thank you. So that brings us to a close of the factory tour. We're going to bring up the speakers for a Q&A, so if the speakers can come up towards the front, that would be great. And in summary, you can see that the factory tour has really been about, for engineers, the hard problems. What are we working on in order to make our users more well understood, provide more relevant results? And for our users, how do we make them happier and healthier with our overall user experiences and these new products that we've brought out? So we're really excited with the start we have today on Google Health, as well as all the progress we've made on the other search properties we've talked about. So why don't you guys come up? And with that, we can go ahead and take questions. We have a mic here in the middle of the room if you wouldn't mind using it so the webcast can hear the questions. That would be great. And there's also roving mics. Okay.
Is it stand?
It's okay. Nobody wants to sit.
Yeah. Actually, I can start. Why don't you guys come take seats?
No, please.
Go.
No. All right.
right.
Probably hear me. Okay, it's turned on now. Thank you. Lisa Krieger, San Jose Mercury News. Can you bring us up to date on the status of partnerships or potential partnerships with local healthcare providers, Kaiser, Palo Alto, Medical Foundation, and also insurance companies, which continue to be the biggest mystery, I think, to most of us?
Sure, we've made excellent progress on all of these partnerships, and Ronnie can talk more about that.
I was just going to say that we don't do exclusive partnerships. We're excited to work with everyone. We're talking to folks locally and nationally, and you can imagine many of those that you mentioned we're in talks with. And if you are a patient somewhere and we don't yet have, and you want access to your records and we can help, go ahead and let them know.
Hi, I'm John Pilato with eWeek. And the question I have regarding Google Health is, to what degree are the personal health records totally separated from the rest of the system, totally private, or is there any kind of sort of anonymous informational aggregating that is going on within Google, with Google Health?
So let me give an example of what we are doing or what we are interested in doing. In terms of aggregated information, if, for example, 6 months from now, there are a lot of Google Health users, and we'd be able to publish a statement that was true according to data from Google Health users along the lines of 10% of diabetics last year who are Google Health users had a flu shot. That would be aggregated information that couldn't be tied back to any individual that we would feel comfortable sharing. Okay? In addition, in terms of connection between different Google properties, two quick comments I'll make, and hopefully that'll help answer your question. One is, right now there is a connection, for example, with the contacts list that you see in Gmail. So with one feature of Google Health, you can search for doctors and import them into your Google Health contacts list. That automatically creates a list, a group within your Gmail contacts. So if you, for example, have 5 doctors and a chiropractor or what have you in your Google Health contacts list, you'll be able to find those in your Gmail contacts as well. The last comment I'll make is that what absolutely will not be the case is that no Google Health user should expect or will ever find their health information as search results anywhere on Google. That information is yours and only you have access to it.
Tom Framsky, Silicon Valley Watcher. We spend so much money on healthcare as a country. Why am I supposed to take more responsibility for my healthcare by integrating all this information? Shouldn't my doctor have this information on hand? After all, they can make better decisions than I can.
Can I take that?
Yeah, let me follow up.
I'm going to just give you that 75% of all healthcare costs are due to chronic illness that you can prevent. We can't do it. You've got to do it. We as physicians can't do it. We as Google can't do it. In other words, we can't take the walk. You have to. You've got to record it someplace, and that's a way, and making it fun and enjoyable is something to inspire you and keep you motivated. But you've got to, you're the only one who can prevent chronic disease. The United States has twice the healthcare costs of Great Britain and Canada. Why? We have twice the chronic disease, and that on a age-weighted basis. And you get to change that if you want to, and that's why Google Health is so important, and the Google Go for Good campaign is so important.
Yeah, and just to build on what Mike said, we can not only prevent diseases, you can often reverse these diseases simply by changing lifestyle. We've shown in our studies that even severe heart disease can be reversed by making changes in diet and lifestyle. Progression of prostate cancer, and by extension, breast cancer can be stopped or perhaps even reversed, especially at early stages. Diabetes, hypertension, obesity, elevated cholesterol levels. And empowerment is not the same as blame. If you're a victim, then there's not much you can do about it. We're moving away from the model where the doctor is the all-knowing and tells the patient what to do, to saying we're a partner, we can empower you with information. And we've shown this in our studies, but now we can make this information available to the people who most need it. Finally, it's coming at a time when healthcare costs, which are really disease care costs, are reaching a tipping point. It's going to become a major focus of the presidential debates, and so the timing couldn't be better in terms of getting information out to people that we know can be beneficial at a time when it's most needed. And at a time when the high-tech interventions, like, for example, angioplasties, have been proven very clearly not to prolong life, not to prevent heart attacks, unless you're in the middle of having one, which 95% of people who get angioplasties are not. And we spent $30 billion in this country on that one procedure alone last year. That's why I'm working with Google. It's an exciting time to be doing it.
And I would also raise the point that even for healthy individuals, this is really an element of convenience and also, in some cases, cost reduction. So, for example, I'm going on a long trip this summer to different places, and I wanted to find out if I was up to date on my vaccinations. Right now, that's very hard to find out. Right? When was my last vaccination at Stanford? Was it here from the Google doctor? Was it from the Palo Alto Medical Foundation? All those records aren't in one place. And having them knitted together just so you understand, do I need this shot or not? And can you actually save the time of having to look all of that information up across all those offices helps. We've also seen interesting cases from the Cleveland Clinic pilot that we did. So for example, the Cleveland Clinic, because it's the nation's leading institution on cardiac work, a lot of people travel there to have their cardiac surgeries. They arrive, and the first thing that Cleveland immediately has to do is repeat all the tests that probably your local doctor just did. So if you actually have this as part of a unified health record, this could be transitioned to Cleveland, and we could avoid all of that, the extra expense and inconvenience to you of having to rerun those tests. Was there another comment? Okay. Yeah. Oh, sorry, do we have the mic?
In the back there, a woman has a mic?
Yeah.
Well, he can go. Am I on?
Yeah,
oh, sorry.
Two questions. First of all, how are you going to make money from this? And can you talk about that in light of privacy? I assume it's advertising support.
No, it's not.
So how does this work for Google's bottom line?
Well, for us, this is really tied to our core mission. It's organizing the world's information. It's a lot of information to bring online, and we think it ultimately makes Google as a tool more useful to users overall.
I might add to that as well that there are a lot of things that we do in trying to build user loyalty and bringing value to the users we were talking about earlier in search properties. You'll notice that some of our other properties like Google News and even image search were very resistant to leaping out and making it immediately relevant to Google's bottom line because it's really the user that comes first.
I'll add also that you'll notice in the product there's a Google search box on every page. And we expect that people who find Google Health useful will spend more time there and do more web search. And they'll get taken to google.com search results, which of course have our standard advertising on the side there.
And you said earlier that you expect thousands of new applications, the best applications are getting from, which implies that there's some sort of open platform for this. Can you discuss how people will plug into this Google Health product?
Absolutely. So today we're also publishing our APIs in Lingo, which means our instructions for how programmers can connect to Google Health. And that's public, and we look forward to working with a whole slew of developers, some of whom we already know about, and I'm sure many of whom we don't yet. And they'll be able to, they'll have ideas I'm sure that we haven't thought of yet. They'll say, you know what people really want is a widget that does X, Y, Z that's personalized to the health information. They'll build that product using our public platform, and we will review their work and work with them and get them integrated, and then users will have the choice whether or not they wish to connect securely with that partner. Correct.
Larry Magid, CBS News. To some extent you answered this, but today happens by coincidence to be the US debut of the Nintendo Wii Fit, which is one of hundreds of gadgets that theoretically could add data to something like Google Health. And I'm thinking of blood pressure monitors, the FitLink system that they have at my local YMCA, and all sorts of gadgets out there. Are you going to be developing some kind of, you mentioned APIs, but is there going to be an attempt to integrate a lot of these other electronics into your health records for tracking your exercise and your health?
So absolutely. We're a surprisingly small team. So we focused on the most important places to start with, but no question that a very high priority is, for example, integrating with blood pressure monitors, basically any devices or any context where the user has health information that they would wish to pull into their Google Health account. We're interested in building those bridges so that they can do that if they so choose. Anything is possible. Like I said, the programming interface is public, so if you have an exercise machine and you know how to hack it, you could do it.
Who has a mic here? Okay. Yeah.
I have a mic.
Okay,
Hi,
great.
Wendy Tanaka with Forbes.com. I have an unrelated question, sort of related though. Does Google have a response to yesterday's Microsoft and Yahoo announcements?
Not at this time.
Thanks.
Yeah, Marissa, Greg Sterling, Search Engine Land. I want to come back to the privacy issue a bit. I think that the underlying service is a great value to end users. There's no question about that. More information sharing will provide a lot of benefits. But I'll never forget a line that somebody from Blue Cross said to me on the phone and telling me why my wife had been denied for coverage, which is, this is a verbatim quote, "Blue Cross makes no apologies for being a for-profit enterprise." And that line will never leave my brain. And I'm wondering about the efforts that employers and insurance carriers might try to undertake to get access to this information. Do you foresee any problems or challenges there? For instance, let me have access to your Google Health profile as a condition of applying for this job or accepting this job, because people know that this kind of information exists.
Well, we certainly have put in place the firmest privacy policy that we could construct. And we are putting the sharing in the hands of the user. So it's at the user's discretion as to whether or not they want to share their profile and their information with anyone. Should it be an insurance company or should it be an employer? And certainly that privacy policy has been designed to try and make it straightforward for users who want to abstain from certain sharing to do so, because it's entirely within their control and at their discretion.
James Nicolai with IDG News Service. I assume this is limited at the moment to North America or to the US. I wonder if you can talk about whether you've even started signing up partners in Europe and Asia, and give us any kind of idea when the service might be available there.
Sure, I can speak to that. So this is indeed a US launch, and we are well aware that the world is a much broader place than just the US, and we're really looking forward to providing this service, assuming that it turns out to be as useful as we hope it is worldwide. We're talking to folks in places such as that you mentioned. There's nothing specific that we have to announce at this time. I think it's worth noting that healthcare is probably a little bit more complex than some of the other products that Google launches. You can imagine that even at the level of, for example, the important area of privacy and regulation around there, we have a lot of homework to do and a lot of learning. So a lot of discussions going on. We look forward to getting there as quickly as possible. It's absolutely part of our mission, but this is where we started.
Hi, Vern Kopitoff, San Francisco Chronicle. How is Google Health differentiated from other electronic file systems?
Can we take that?
Sure.
Sure. Okay. So, first of all, I think it's a really important and good thing that there are many smart and resourced organizations working on this problem. This is a big area. I think that the whole notion of personal health records and related is an era. It's really just beginning. We understand a fair amount about them, but we're certainly learning as we go. The fact that really only a few % of people in this country are using those kinds of tools at this point really means that we haven't, the royal we haven't gotten it right yet. So what we have focused on is an excellent user experience, an open platform so that users can connect to places that might have some of their healthcare information, like their pharmacy and their hospital, and that same open platform so that third parties who have great ideas of what those users could do and therefore make it a much more meaningful experience to have their healthcare in one place so that they can really act on it. Those are the things that we're focusing on most closely, and we'll certainly leave it up to you to give us feedback about which parts we're doing great and which parts we could do better.
And I would even summarize more concisely. It's about the 3 Ps and the U: privacy, platform, portability, and users. Those are really the things that set Google Health apart. It makes your data more portable. It's done on a platform, so anyone can interplay with it. It's done with ultimate privacy, and it's done with a big user focus. We think that the user interface is one of the nicest parts of the application. It's extremely user-friendly. It's easy to interact with or organize. I know myself, and I thought about, like, well, what format does a doctor's chart even have? And if I could look at it, would I even be able to understand it? taking that apart, breaking it down, and displaying it in a way that makes it really easy to interact with is one of the key differentiating features of Google Health.
And just to build on that, besides the medical benefits of having access to this information, to avoid the kind of drug interactions or to have your EKG available at 2 in the morning if you show up in the emergency room, it's been estimated that 30% of healthcare costs are due to waste and inefficiency. A lot of it is spent chasing down information. And so if we're going to try to make healthcare affordable to the people who most need it, the 47 million Americans, for example, that would be part of a universal healthcare plan, we have to find ways of making the system more efficient, and this is a really good start.
Yeah.
David Louie with ABC7. Given the issues of ID theft and hacking that go on, in the internet space now, what risks are there to medical facilities and to doctors in terms of potential modification of records, and what legal exposure do you have if something is, after you've distributed it or have shared it with the user, with the patient, that if something is modified, if there's a drug interaction because somebody didn't change their records or somebody had the information hacked, what protection do we have that you're not going to open up a legal mess as a result of this?
I'll take a first stab at that. So whenever I get asked hard questions, I always think choice and transparency. Those are really the key tenets that drive everything that we're doing here. So transparency means that we make it as clear as we know how to the user what they're doing, what they're deciding to do, what they're deciding not to do. And choice means that it's completely up to them. Like we said, the user decides who, if anyone, has access to their information, and they can also revoke such access if they do grant it. With respect to the question about modification of records, it's a really important one. We've learned a lot along the way from our advisory council and the many partners that we're working with on how to best do that. So you saw in the demonstration that I was able to enter a condition and/or a medication myself, and it was clearly indicated there as user entered. I was also able to import some data, for example, from Walgreens Pharmacy. Now, I could annotate the record that I imported from Walgreens Pharmacy with a note. For example, I could say, Ronnie, remember to take this at night because it makes you a little bit sleepy. Okay? However, I can't change the dose. I can't increase the number of refills. I can only add a separately kept note. So if I then import something from Walgreens and then share it with my doctor at the Cleveland Clinic, my doctor there will see the attribution. My doctor there, she'll see what is user entered and what had been imported from Walgreens.
About hacking, you want to address that?
Yes, right here.
Yes, Stephen Shanklin from cnetnews.com. I'm having trouble figuring out where exactly data is stored. I understand I can import information into Google Health, but it seems like there are also a lot of other databases that it perhaps ties into that might be stored elsewhere, at my doctor's office, at Walgreens perhaps, or I don't know, maybe it's updated automatically. I'm wondering about the situation where I want to figure out, do I want to share information that's at this medical facility with that doctor over there or with this pharmacy? And it sort of seems like a combinatorics nightmare. And I'm also wondering specifically if there's a granularity setting. Do I share all or just some? How do I control that?
Great question. So the first question, I think the best way to think about it is that Google, on your behalf, is storing a copy of your records. You can enter data into that account. You can import a copy from Walgreens or Long's or Beth Israel in Boston, and then you have a copy. You haven't taken away the data from your account at Walgreens. You've just made a copy of it. If you then in turn decide to share some of that data with your local hospital and they've integrated with Google Health, then you're giving them the right to pull a copy or to read from yours. But this is a user-controlled database that, of course, Google is hosting. Depending on how the connections are set up, the user may have the ability to continue to regularly pull data from, say, their Cleveland Clinic account. Similarly, depending on what privileges they've given to the Cleveland Clinic may have the right to regularly pull data from the Google Health account.
And this is explained as you set up each set of sharing links. So the way this would work, for example, for me, is I would pick Quest because they do my diagnostics, I would pick Walgreens because they handle my pharmacy, and probably Palo Alto Medical Foundation. So it's as easy as picking out your medical providers out of the list. You go through the agreement to set up the sharing link with each one, and then information is regularly pulled in accordance with those sharing procedures. That means then, should I want to start, say, seeing the Google doctor here and wanted to share the information from those three sources with her, it's easy because it's already in my copy of the data, and I would just set up a sharing link with the Google doctor who could then see all this information. But it's really as easy as choosing your providers out of a list.
And you can always change it too.
And your question about granularity is an important one. So as of the version that we launched today, it is all or none sharing of your profile. And we absolutely recognize that granularity is something that people want, and we're working on it. But we thought that you all had been waiting enough.
I think it's also important to point out that in that sharing model, it's all or none for your Google copy of that information. We are not opening up sharing access directly from your provider.
And I think we have time for one more question right here.
I'm John Pilato with eWeek. A more fundamental question to address my colleague's question is, how secure is the database in Google? How secure would my records be from hacking, from intrusion by anyone? How do you protect that? It's the most personal thing you own.
It's at our highest level of security. So the computers that it's stored on are actually more secure than, say, our search servers or anything else, because we understand how private that is. So we've constructed a special infrastructure with an additional layer of security on it in order to achieve that.
But for what it's worth, at the Google Health Advisory Council meetings, this has been the #1 topic that we've discussed. We brought in some of the top privacy experts. We completely get it. We completely share your concerns. And we've been really happy with how Google has gone about addressing them.
I want to thank everyone for being here today. Thanks.